Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, Sallie Woods, VP of HR at High Noon Restaurant Group, shares her extensive experience within the restaurant industry, emphasizing the importance of training and development for employees. She discusses the generational shifts in workforce expectations, highlighting the need for companies to adapt to the demands of younger employees who seek respect and engagement. Sallie also touches on the future of employee benefits and support, advocating for a more flexible and understanding workplace. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
Sallie, thanks so much for being on the podcast here today.
Thank you for inviting me. It was funny. I was talking to, Allie, and she's very passionate in what she does. And we're talking a little bit about the book, and I was reading some of the things, and I'm like, that's what I've been talking about. I'm like, that's what I've been saying. So I thought it was very interesting, and some really good points in there.
Yeah, well, thanks for reading. And for our audience that doesn't know much about you or the company, give us a high-level overview of who Sallie is and what company you work for and what do you do there?
Sure. So my name is Sallie Woods. I work at High Noon Restaurant Group. We have over 93 Popeyes locations in Louisiana and Mississippi. I've been in the restaurant industry for over 30 years. Most of my background is in operations. I worked probably every position, in operations. And then I started really going into training. I think training was my passion, and I loved it. And about 10 years ago, I went into the HR. And
Love it. So talk to me a little bit about that, like training being your passion. Like, what about it gets you really excited? And you having an opportunity to do a lot of things in operations. Why'd you pick there as your kind of point of purpose?
I really enjoy working and being a mentor and seeing someone or having the ability to affect their lives. That's the one thing that's really great about the restaurant industry, especially, QSR, is that the door's wide open. There are a lot of opportunities, in that industry, and the industry is always growing. Again, I've worked in all different types of restaurants and even hotels throughout my career. I enjoyed all of them. I just happened to be in the fast food over the last probably 20 years. And the first thing that I noticed was that I don't think there was a great training system and routines. And I guess I was lucky that I was able to communicate what needed to get done. And I like spending the time with the people. And so my career developed into the training department. And then working with a lot of different companies and training a lot of people over the years, I realized that there was a disconnect between operations and HR. And that's how I really got into HR, is that disconnect, because, you want to take care of your people, and everybody, in the company is usually on the same goal. But the HR department's never really been in operations. A lot of people, restaurants are different. They're completely different. And same thing with retail. It's just it's a different way of working. It's a different way of life, so to speak. And I noticed that the HR department didn't understand that, and that's when I started getting into that.
Yeah, and a lot to digest there, right? And a lot of things that I'm gonna pull on. It's primarily, and like what's most interesting about your story and what you just said, I think, was QSR. A lot of doors wide open with opportunities. That's what you said. And as you read in the book, I think that there's a misunderstanding, and I don't want to say disrespect, but maybe that is kind of the best way to describe it, is people think like, oh, if you go to work at a Popeyes or a McDonald's, like that's a bad thing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there's whole sections of this book and a lot of other literature around. It's actually a great place to start. And if you do it correctly, there's a lot of natural evolutions that a person can have if they stick with it. Talk to me a little bit about maybe, programs you have at your locations or success stories you've seen of when you invest in people that work on the front lines, like what they can do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So in the restaurant business, it's one of those things where we have a lot of people. In fact, a lot of our top leaders started out as a team member, as a crew member.
Mm,
That's where they started. I can give you so many stories in the restaurant business.
mm,
And what happens is first is understanding and being able to do the tasks. So that's the first part of the job. And then of course having the integrity, and accountability. And then for a company to be able to identify those people. And that's the part that I enjoyed. And that's when I really got into the training, was being able to identify people that had that talent, and then to give them the opportunity to go into management. And the first step, it could be a shift supervisor. But as you grow within the company and your responsibilities come more, that's where you need to have more, or a company, I should say, needs to have more classes and development with their people on the leadership skills. And I think that's where sometimes the problem is. And then also a little bit on the admin. A lot of our shift managers to start out with are very great in running the shift. But to be able to continue on with their career, they have to be with a company that's going to continue to have development classes, which is
mm,
something that we do. So we're really proud of our training program. We're also very strict on our training program. So the first part is of course going through all the e-learning. And just by going through the e-learning, it's not just what you're watching in the video, but you're actually learning and having an idea of what the priorities are, how to navigate through all these videos and all this new technology sometimes it is for people, understanding what the priorities are of the franchise and of the company. And then the next part is that leadership skills and how to communicate. We have a lot
mm.
of different classes on that. And that we hold, we have a whole training department here at High Noon. So we like to hold at least quarterly meetings and monthly meetings, or sometimes webinars, just on how to interview, how to talk to your employees, how to start off the shift, and how to set expectations. Because those things don't come normal. You know what I mean? Those things are
Yeah.
something that you need to learn.
Yeah. And do you think that, we're entering a really interesting time in the workforce where, Gen Alpha is coming, millennials, Gen Zs are here, and, the boomers and such are kind of graduating out. And, in this space particularly, it's a revolving door of generations because it's usually the younger workers that come in. So you're kind of the first industry to kind of see how the new generation comes in and treats work. Because what we know is that millennials treat work very differently than boomers. And the way I approach work and my peers approach work are very different than my parents for a million reasons, right? And in your experience, just kind of with Gen Alpha, Gen Z, this first wave or cohort of people that are working inside the locations, what do they care about? What are they interested in? Are they a purple squirrel unicorn? Talk to me a little bit about that, because I'm fascinated by this.
Well, that's really interesting. I'll have to say, I've had a lot of conversations with my children about this. So my daughter is 26, my son is 30, and we definitely don't see eye to eye in what the expectation is.
Right.
Kind of that you mentioned. I will tell you that my father, I remember, I had to go to work when I was 16, was, get your job, and that was it. And the first thing he said is, whoever said you had to like your job,
Right.
you go. That was the attitude. I never. What do you mean? What are you complaining about your boss? Who said you have to like your job? You go in,
Yeah.
you get your money.
Yeah.
And that's not how it is today at all. Which is good. Which is changing. I think the restaurant industry is a little slow to the change in some areas,
Right.
but it's definitely different. And I think I think we've seen some changes over the decades. I'm sad to say that I've been through a lot of them.
Yeah.
But yeah. So actually, I don't know if you remember. Back in the 80s, there was a real crunch. The late 80s, especially with all the stocks and everything, and all of that was blooming. So getting help in the restaurant industry was very difficult. And there was a lot of new theories going out, and that's when they really started having the recognition with employees and having the pins, and all of that was big. And then that died out. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, right before the recession, it went through a lot of talked about recognition of having employee of the month and stuff like that. And that kind of died out. And what happened is these ideas are great, and they started out, but nobody maintained them. So the employee of the month almost became a, well, that's rigged. It's just who's your favorite. And the pin became something of, oh, well, here's a great pin, but they don't mean anything. And so now, we're with the challenge, and I think it's a good question of what are the people looking for? And I think the first thing you have to do is you have to ask. I mean, I have over 2,000 employees in 93 different buildings, pretty much 93 different communities. So it's actually a different answer for each area. I think the first thing and the most important thing is they want to be heard. And that is the biggest thing. If they have a voice about their job and what they're doing, and they're getting and giving respect both ways. So they're getting that respect from the company, and they understand that when they're giving the respect, we're appreciating it. I think that's the first step, and that's made a big difference.
Yeah, what's so interesting is you've seen a lot of different cycles, like the late 80s, late 90s. And, what I've lived through is the COVID epidemic, right?
Oh.
And how that impacts, and of course you did too, like that, how that impacts the labor market where, of course, when there's 15% unemployment, the employee kind of holds all the power, right? Because they're like, I'm only going to come back if it's really, really good because I'm getting money from the government and I'm able to work remote or from home or not work at all. And now, I think during that time, we kind of saw a crunch of initiatives and excitement and programs to get people to come back, right? And I don't know if there was quite one thing that kind of like the employee of the month example that you gave, but it became kind of like a movement towards empowering the hourly workers. And I think that we're in a really interesting now kind of on the tail end of COVID, or after COVID is, kind of now the company now holds more power than maybe it did, 2 years ago at the peak. And my question, and, we don't have a crystal ball here, but is it going to be the same as in late 90s and 80s of we do something and then it just goes away, right? Like, are we living in that pattern right now? Or, kind of with generational change, are we going to see it stay longer and more programming and, all those positive things for the hourly workers? What's just kind of thoughts around that?
I think it's actually here to stay for a few different reasons. One is just because of the communication abilities and the technology that's out there. But the other thing is because our employees are asking for it. I think that's huge. They're demanding it. So the hourly employee, is the core of our business, but they now have the expectations. So when we're fighting for employees, part of that is the tasks that they're going to be doing, the job that they're going to be doing, but it's also meeting their expectations. And I think the companies that don't understand what their expectations are going to have a really hard time staffing. And their expectations are to be able to maybe not necessarily work at home, but to be having a more flexible schedule. Right. I think the expectations now, as they should be, is to be able to have some paid time off, which our company does. And I'll tell you, that's something that we're really proud of. I know, years ago, who would ever think an hourly employee would get a paid vacation? You know what I mean? Just, they didn't have it. And we do have that. And then also, I think when they're working, the employees are also demanding to be taught, trained on how to do the job. Where years ago, it was kind of like throw into the fire, and if you figure it out, you're good. And, and if you don't,
Yeah, super interesting. And there's a lot of things I think, that support that. And I think a lot, and I just had a conversation with somebody about the presence of social media and that holding a lot of companies more accountable than it did in the past, right? So not gone is the days, but fewer of the days of, you enter a job, you're treated poorly, and you're kind of like stuck there, right? Yeah. Where now, if you're treated poorly and you take out your phone and you record your manager doing something and post on TikTok, I mean, that's nuclear, right? And there's so much more accessibility, to your point, to technology and job boards and access to other people at other jobs that's creating more, I think, competition naturally that drives companies, whether they're doing it for good or for profit, regardless, it's still good for the hourly worker to have retention strategies and policies. So no, I have just a few more questions. We are running up on time. This one went by super fast. The
Yeah.
best ones always do. When you're looking at 2025, what are you seeing as like the next frontier? Like, what are you most focused on for the hourly worker, and what are some things that you're doing to address that?
That's a big question. So I guess the first thing is to continue on with providing the benefits. Again,
Mm.
something that I'm proud of because I can tell you years ago, as an hourly worker, they really weren't available, and what was available wasn't good. So although insurance is we could probably talk for hours about that, medical insurance, everything.
Yeah.
It continues to increase, but if we can continue to work with the companies, and if we make our budget and we continue as a company to say that we're going to put this portion of money into it, and we can maintain or lower the contribution to the employees, that's something that we're always trying to do. The other thing that we've noticed is it's getting more and more difficult and to be financially secure. And so I've been working. Now there's companies out there. MoneyFit is one example. FinFit is one example. And being able to provide the service to our hourly employees on having an 800 number to get some free financial advice. And I'm not talking about investing money. I'm talking about how to pay your college bills, how to pay
Mhm.
or straighten out your bills, stuff like that, and providing
Interesting.
that service. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting, super valuable. So I ask every single person as their last question on this podcast the same thing. It's, what was your first hourly job, and did you leave gracefully, or were you fired from that job?
Okay. Well, actually, it's a funny question. So my very first job, actually, I got hired. It was just a new restaurant. It was a Chinese restaurant that just opened up, and I lived out in the country in New Jersey. So it
Mm.
was food that I've never actually even had, and this was a long time ago. They hired me to be the register operator, and they showed me the register and then put me there, and it was mobbed, and I didn't know the menu, and I didn't know how to ring anything up, and it was a disaster. So they the poor guys, and they were busy working, but they didn't speak English. So they
Yeah.
pushed me to the side, and when I went to the side, I fell against the wall, and the lights went out. So this is the first brand day, the grand opening, and the lights went out. So I didn't go back there, but my second job a few days later was at another diner, and I ended up working there my entire high school life, and they even helped me out to go to college, and it worked out really well. And I did every job there. They hired me as a dishwasher, and after a week, the owner was like, "Honey, I don't think you should be doing dishes," and he had me then be a hostess, and then I ended up doing his accounting and waitressing and all that stuff.
Very nice, very nice. No, thank you so much for sharing. And if somebody wants to learn more about the company, what's the best way to do that?
You can go into LinkedIn and set a message. You can definitely get in touch, call the office. We're in the phone book, so to speak. And then, of course, we always have different job posts out there. So you can go on Popeye's career sites or just any career sites.
All right, perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.